I've been playing around with this drone for the last couple of days. Mostly because I'm interested in finding a way of filming myself as I walk around and shoot in a very non-intrusive sort of way. I know a drone may seem intrusive because it makes a loud buzzing noise, but actually like lugging around a tripod and pointing it at myself and making sure I'm in focus, that's intrusive. It makes it impossible to actually get a good photo when I have to spend so much time getting good video of me getting a good photo. I can't do both of those things at the same time, I've determined. But someone had suggested in a comment a particular drone, and I thought, oh yeah, maybe, but the idea sort of lingered in my brain, and not knowing much about drones, I started my search with that particular model they mentioned, and yeah, it did seem like a really good option, and I managed to get my hands on one without making a large investment. And the plan is to film myself, sure, but I couldn't help it once I had the drone in the air. What I actually wanted to do was to take photos with it. Use it in a more traditional way. Use the drone as the camera. I'm not a particularly inspiring subject, you see. But I had to get over that initial fear of crashing the thing. Well, truthfully, I never actually got over it, but you have to sort of learn to work alongside it until you can get over it, I suppose. But the fear is entirely warranted. I am a novice pilot. I've tried to cram as much information as possible into my brain over the last couple of days, but I don't actually know what I'm doing. Not from an experiential point of view, anyway. How will I react in a moment where things are going wrong? Probably poorly. It also occurred to me that, although I'm shooting from a vantage point in the air that I couldn't have reached before, I'm still shooting, like, across the landscape, exactly as I would from the ground, and that maybe I'm not taking full advantage in doing so. I should be shooting straight down, because that's something I couldn't have done before, and maybe that will unlock previously inaccessible compositions. So I'm just playing with the drone. Didn't plan to use any of this. I ordered some indie filters, they haven't arrived yet. I'm not even shooting at a frame rate that matches my timeline. Ultimately, there are many things I'm likely going to change, bit depth and color related. But right now I'm just trying to get a handle on the thing. Get used to takeoffs, landings, handling the controls, so forth and so on. Again, didn't plan to use any of this, it just so happens that I was forced to, because of what happens. So now I let the thing track me. The exposure kind of sucks, and the color kind of sucks, even in comparison to this GoPro footage that I just cut to. But that wasn't the point. I just wanted to bring it home and see how well it did tracking me. Should I have it track me from the front, from the back, from the side? How far away? How high? How low? Those are the sorts of questions I had. Also, there are different tracking modes, different ways of it tracking me. Should it physically follow me, or should it be stationary and only pan the camera toward me? And how well will it even cut together with the images, or with the GoPro footage? Both in terms of quality and in terms of perspective. Will that be a weird perspective shift? I don't know. These are all questions I had. In general, yeah, the drone footage looks worse than the GoPro footage, but I think it's largely a settings issue. I really think once I am shooting in a higher bit depth and a flat profile, frame rate that matches my timeline, and, by the way, I was using exposure compensation, negative 0.3 EV, I would say like negative a full stop, maybe, by judging by the way this looks. Although that also looks overexposed, but that's where my GoPro sits. It's like negative one full stop. Just retain as much highlight detail as possible. And I have that ND filter set on the way, but the thing is I don't use an ND filter on the GoPro because it messes up the stabilization. And the GoPro stabilization is excellent and one of its best features. So maybe not using the ND filter will make it match the GoPro a little bit better. Yeah, I would just need to do an experiment there, try it both ways. Also, the image is definitely over-sharpened coming out of the drone in comparison to the GoPro. The GoPro probably started that way in default settings, so I just need to locate that and dial it back on the drone. I was very pleased with the quality of the raw, still images coming out of the drone, so I really do think it's just a settings/software issue. I don't always love the way the drone composes the shots when it's tracking me. This one's fine, but a lot of times it leaves too much leg room, and I tried panning up manually, but it didn't work, at least not in that tracking mode. I remember distinctly when I was flying over this area thinking how terrible of a place this would be to crash the drone. Like, it's just the fucking wilderness. There's no trail. Imagine trying to get up on one of these peaks and recover your drone. That would suck, right? Well, it was a few hours later, but I did crash it in exactly that spot. I don't have the footage, at least not a high-res copy. I have a low-res copy on the controller because I remotely formatted the card. The controller and the drone still had a connection, but I gave it my best shot reaching the drone. I was wearing shorts, my legs were getting scratched and cut into oblivion. I was losing the light, it was going to be dark in 45 minutes or so. I didn't have water, I was carrying a heavy camera bag. It just became clear I needed to come back the next morning better prepared, and hopefully it would be okay overnight. So that's what I did. Here I am, first thing the next morning. I've got me a pole, a stupid pole. It's like part of a background stand. But that's because the ground can be soft. I know I'm going to have to go over some steeply inclined ground, and it's very easy to slip, fall, get hurt. However, bringing a metal pole that's kind of sharp, I'm just as likely to impale myself as be saved by it. It's really tough when going uphill to step over these giant swaths of cacti. If you slide back at all, you're totally getting stabbed. But I was better prepared. Long pants, long sleeves, backpack full of water, snacks. I was sort of trying to outsmart the map, which turned out to be stupid, but I wasn't going in a straight line toward where I knew the drone was. I had GPS coordinates from the remote. Instead, I was going in S patterns because I was trying to find the path of least resistance. I thought I could deal with the incline better than I could deal with obstacles, like going through bushes and through cactus and over rocks. That seemed way harder to me. I was wrong, but that's how it seemed at the time. So I was trying to outsmart the map when, in reality, it turned out the map was way smarter than me, and it won. I ended up nowhere near the drone. I kept veering toward the path of least resistance and getting farther and farther away from where I needed to be. But it was impossible to tell from working with the Google Maps app on my phone. I thought I could get a 3D view, but I could not. And distance-wise, I knew I was not close to the drone, but height-wise, I thought I was getting close to the drone. But at some point it became clear that I was not on the right mountain, hill, mound of dirt, whatever, that I wasn't on the same one as the drone. So my plan of following the parts of the map that looked more open, less dense, backfired spectacularly. God. At this point I had given up, and I'm heading back, although not the same direction. I couldn't find the route that I had taken. And I'm coming back on just the opposite side of this little mountain. But I had to commit to sliding down the dirt that way, and it was far too steep to climb back up. Couldn't see what was ahead, but what is ahead are these rocks, and a pretty substantial drop. I searched to the right, I searched to the left. There was no immediately obvious route down. But then I searched again, and I found something that I might be able to manage. Boy, when you're descending, branches are your best friend. But I'm wrapping it up now. I'm calling it. I'm heading home. That's the plan. I tried. I had to try. This area is so inaccessible. I'm thinking to myself, 20 years from now, the drone is still going to be sitting in exactly the same spot. That is until I reviewed the map in 3D when I got home in a web browser. This is the area I made it to today, but ended up veering way too far on the wrong side of the mountain. I did not have a sense of the peaks and valleys at all from the other version of the map. It just looked completely flat. This is where the drone actually was. So I needed to go down a valley, up a peak, and down another valley from where it was. I just took a stupid path. I got very far off course. And these are those rocks I got down from there at the end, but I ended up going around. And here I am the next day. Not first thing in the morning. I had been not really getting enough sleep for several days in a row leading up to this. And getting up again first thing in the morning, I just was not going to be able to function. I had stuff going on, but insomnia was the real problem. It had been like 4 days in a row where I got maybe 2 hours of sleep. So I haven't been showing much of the previous search attempts, and that's because I plan to show this final day in excruciating detail. Day 3. There will not be a day 4. Day 1 only lasted an hour. It was right when I lost the drone, but day 2 was pretty rough. Didn't intend to do a day 3, but here I am. But this is it. I either find it or I don't. You know, I have the freedom to keep going or give up at any point. I need to try one more time for my own peace of mind. If I don't find it, if I can't physically do it, then I'll be paying the fee. My strategy was completely different this day. There will be no S patterns, there will be no following the course of least resistance. I'm going in a straight line from where I started to where I know the drone is, and I'm going to barrel through every obstacle. Of course, I will encounter some things that I have to go around, but the priority will be always to get back on the path of the straight line. And I plotted that out on my map in advance, so there's no room for getting confused. So maybe I'll make it, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll make it and I won't find the thing. But I'm just gonna take all the branches whacking me in the face, poking me in the side. That's just the way it's gonna have to be. And I am climbing in a valley, although it's still ascending at the same rate as the mountain around the valley. Shit. That's too steep. But that was constantly the decision. Go through this giant clump of bushes or over this big rock or go around it and deal with the steep ground. And 9 out of 10 times, I just went through the obstacle as planned. So maybe the valley kind of preventing me from going around ultimately will be another factor keeping me on course, keeping me from making the same mistake I made yesterday. Shit. The steepness of the ground just continued to be a problem. It is of no help to be in a valley in a situation like that. These tall cactuses, fortunately I was wearing a backpack because I had to go around a lot of tall cactuses. I didn't want to hurt the cactus. I still tried not to whack it with my backpack, but at least it protected me a little bit. Super excited to find this clearing. That is that. Took the chance to reorient myself with the map, with the crash video, as well as take a long-ass break. Oh, that coffee is almost too hot to drink. Cacti. I said cactuses, didn't I? Cacti. So here's how or why I crashed the drone. Drone laws are confusing. Where I am in the United States, there are federal drone laws, there are state laws, regulations, there are local ordinances. Where you can and cannot fly may not even be the same from day to day. I mean, it's not impossible to understand. You just need to do your research. Sometimes I want to skip that step, but you really can't with drone piloting. But one law that seems to be fairly consistent around the United States is that the maximum altitude that you're allowed to fly is 400 feet. This is in no way unclear. So this particular point was the most paranoia-inducing for me. But it's further complicated by the fact that your drone controller will tell you how high you're flying in relation to where you launched. But the law has nothing to do with where you launched. It's above the ground. So there is a lot of guesswork involved. Say if you're flying in a mountainous area, such as I was. The drone controller software allows you to set a maximum height, which I had done. I set it to just below 400 feet, but in order to fly in this area, I had to raise that. Now, with the experience I have, having gone through this crash, I wouldn't use that software limiter. I would just pay attention to how high I'm flying, because that ultimately caused the crash. That is, my expectations for how the commands I was giving it would be interpreted was completely out of whack with what the developers intended. I wasn't performing, the drone was performing an automated return to home. And after about 30 seconds of flying back toward me, I figured that was enough time where I could drop the altitude. And I imagined it would fly in sort of a diagonal line, both toward me and toward the ground at the same time. But being that I used this limiter to drop the altitude rather than some other method, like just pulling down on the joystick, it just ceased all forward movement and dropped like a fucking rock out of the sky. Shit. I may have to. Oh, that's prickly. Sorry, Mr. Tree. There. Sorry, tree. Oh shit, that's nice. A little bit of a clearing. Alright. Let's look at the compass. My interpretation of what happened exactly in those final few seconds has changed a little bit versus when I was experiencing it live and now having reviewed the low-res crash video a couple of times. Also, by the way, I could have, when the controller was still connected to the drone remotely, I could have downloaded the crash video, or all the video. I didn't for various reasons. And I'm not that sad about it, mostly because I was just performing tests. None of this was meant to be final anything. But my interpretation originally was that, oh fuck, I hit that tree, that tall tree that kind of jutted out from the landscape. But that is clearly not what happened. It almost hit the tree. Obstacle avoidance kicked in. It saw the tree. It strafed to the left. Strafed may not be the correct aeronautical term, but I'm using it in the sense of like keeping your eyes fixed on a target but moving side to side. That's how I'm using the term. So it strafed to the left, then it picked up multiple branches, propellers got caught in those multiple branches, and it went down. God. I guess ultimately it's irrelevant whether or not it hit that specific tree, but I was trying to identify that tree in reverse, looking at the video. Whereas in the video it's facing out, but I would be facing in. But identifying the tree would go a long way toward getting me in the right spot, the right general area, whether or not it hit the tree. It definitely went down near that tree. So I was getting close enough now that I was looking actively for that tree. I guess the primary reason I didn't download the video remotely is because I was trying to preserve battery life. In a situation like this, I think it would be cool if you could remotely put the drone to sleep in a low power state and either wake it up from the remote like the next morning, or if not that, at least schedule it to wake up or power on, like maybe shut down until 8 a.m. and then power on, and I'll be back and I could establish a connection again, and then or have it wake up once an hour. Anything, just some kind of low power state where I could maintain a connection with the drone over a period of time. I don't know why that hasn't been thought of. That seems pretty reasonable and pretty obvious. And frankly, pretty doable from a software and hardware engineering standpoint. When I came back the next morning, I brought the controller with me, hoping to establish a connection, but kind of assuming I wouldn't be able to. And indeed, I wasn't able to. There's a button on there to help locate your drone where you can cause it to make noise and flashlights.
Dude.
I'm getting kind of excited at this point because the landscape is beginning to match what I saw in the crash video. See, it avoided that tall tree. Okay, it did go forward a little bit, and then it got hung up in the branches.
So it's not this tree. I thought it was initially. I think it's that tree. No, it's that way.
So at this point, I'm still thinking it actually hit the tallest tree in that shot, but it didn't, and also that's irrelevant, as mentioned. That'll get me in roughly the right spot. But that first night I tried the flashing and beeping button, and it didn't help.
Sorry, tree.
I evidently wasn't close enough to see the flashing. I wasn't close enough to hear the beeping.
Sorry about this. I'll try not to do any damage.
But it would be super useful to have that ability right now. But can't do it. Drone battery's dead. Long dead at this point. But today I didn't even bring the controller with me at all.
Okay, could it be that tree? Let's consult the map.
But that probably speaks more to the fact that I wasn't super optimistic about my chances of finding the thing. Oh God, I wanted to find it. It just seemed impossible.
That one. That way. Alright.
There's a thing that protects the propellers from being broken in your bag. I didn't bring that. There's a thing that protects the gimbal from being broken in your bag. I didn't bring that either.
Alright. That's pretty steep. Let's see. Shit. Can I go around? Maybe I can go around.
Maybe I just forgot. I don't know, but I didn't forget the day before. I think it speaks more to my confidence level of actually recovering this thing. Physically getting myself to the coordinates seems impossible enough, but what are the chances it's just going to be sitting there? Actually, the last thing on the crash video you see is like the camera hitting a rock. So I'm thinking maybe it slid down a rock into a crevice, similar to where I got down the other day. And to that end, I brought some string with me, just in case it's like inaccessibly low between some rocks and I have to lower some string and loop it around one of the arms. Who knows what I'm gonna find? Probably nothing at all. But you know, one thing I didn't think of being an extremely novice drone pilot is that I could have just presumably panned the camera around to get a better look at where it crashed. Didn't even occur to me. I say presumably because, I don't know, maybe the gimbal was damaged or the camera was damaged. Maybe that wouldn't have worked, but it was worth a try. Didn't occur to me. I mean, I did think to grab the GPS coordinates before I drove away that night. I did think to format the card. You know, probably no one will find it up here, but if someone did, I don't want them to have access to my video. Granted, they could probably just perform some recovery on the card and get the data off there, but maybe they wouldn't know that or care to be bothered. And of course, time and weather are just gonna make it less and less possible that someone would ever get something off the memory card. I was getting very, very excited at this point. Like, optimism was starting to creep in. Because I knew I was close.
That's that one. Yeah, and there's a second one. Hit that tree. It passed. No, it didn't quite pass that tree. Fuck, it's gotta be right there.
Inadvertently, I had sort of passed the crash site. I was at a higher elevation due to going around some obstacle. But that worked out great. It gave me a better vantage point from which to search for it.
Come on, it's gotta be around here. It should be right on top of it.
And I knew it ended up on a big rock. Not this one, though, because this is at a higher elevation. I successfully, after a few failed attempts, identified the tree that it almost hit. Now I need to identify the rock where it landed. At this point, I'm like feeling fucking invincible, like I'm actually here.
Fuck, man, that's pretty dense.
I started fantasizing about just coming upon it. There it is. And then I would take a photo, send it to my wife. She was worried about me being out here doing this. I was worried too. Amazingly, I had cell phone signal this entire trek through the wilderness. 1 bar, but 1 bar will do. And yeah, I'm getting a little bit more violent with this branch than I've wanted to get so far. I am getting low on fuel. But at the same time, like, kind of crazy driven because it feels like I'm so close. You could really tell, though, that nobody comes around here. I didn't see, like, one single sign of human interference throughout the whole journey over here.
Holy shit, I found it. Holy shit, I found it. Holy shit.
It happened almost exactly the way I imagined it, and I did indeed send a photo to the wife before even picking it up. But it's funny, I thought it was facing down, only the camera was facing down. Also, it was a much smaller rock than I imagined. The drone surprisingly looks extremely undamaged. There are a couple scrapes, particularly on some propellers, but also on the body itself. But nothing really appears broken. How cool would it be if it just worked, if it was fine? Even if not, though, it's just a small fee now to get it replaced under insurance, versus a much larger fee if I hadn't located it.
God.
I feel like this drone and I have history now, like we've been through something. And I'm ready to make the commitment. I want to own it, not just one like it. I want to own this drone, specifically. You know, on the way up, an empty can of carbonated water had fallen out of my backpack when I was squeezing my way through some very narrow passage. I wasn't able to grab it, at least not easily, so I tried extremely hard to follow exactly the same route home in order to retrieve the can. And that might seem silly and obsessive, but I didn't pass one single piece of human junk out here, and I didn't want the only one to be attributable to me. That just seemed extremely selfish and entitled and shitty. So I was able to find the can on the way back too. Just one success after another. But holy fuck am I looking forward to getting back to the car and getting home again. Really curious to see if the drone works. I've also decided upon a name. Defiant is the name of my drone.
Okay. This isn't going well. God! Alright. Well, I survived that.
Dealing with steeply inclined ground is generally, from what I've discovered, more dangerous on the way down than it was on the way up. But so I'm super excited to get into drone photography, drone videography to a lesser degree. But mostly with this drone, I'm just looking to film myself. To have some wide shots of me taking my photos, so it's not all from the perspective of a GoPro. I still think that's a good perspective, me wearing a GoPro. But I would just sometimes like something to cut to. And my hope is that the drone will make that fairly easy to capture. And if not easy, just not intrusive, as I mentioned a while ago. The non-intrusiveness is the important part. The fact that I don't have to put thought behind it, because doing so prevents me from putting thought behind what I'm actually doing, taking photos. So if the drone can just film me, and maybe it's a shitty composition, maybe I use the shot, maybe I don't, just to have it, I think will help flesh out what I'm doing a little bit more. I don't think I'd be able to take it with me in an area like this. And I must say, although this was somewhat unpleasant, I think I also enjoyed it in some weird way as well. Being where people don't go and roughing it a little bit. And I saw tons of cool photo potential out here. Didn't have a camera with me. I mean, I had my phone, I had my GoPro, but I also had an agenda and like a clear purpose. But I'd be super interested in coming back out here with a camera and making a day of it. And yeah, I don't think the drone will really survive out here. Also, this is literally wilderness. It's classified as wilderness. And you're not allowed to launch the drone from an area classified as wilderness. You're not allowed to land in an area classified as wilderness. And you're not allowed to pilot the drone from the wilderness. You can, however, pilot the drone through the wilderness if you're standing outside of it, and that's what I was doing. So I was not actually breaking the law when I was flying here, other than maybe the crash itself counts as landing. It's stupid. I hate laws. I mean, I don't hate laws, but what I mean is laws that you can get around so easily with some ridiculous loophole feel like arbitrary laws, and arbitrary anything just frustrates the fuck out of me. I like things that have a good reason, or things that are well reasoned. But red tape filled, bureaucratic, nightmarish nonsense, that I can do without. I mean, I can see a good reason not to allow flying drones in the wilderness. It's for exactly the reason I mentioned. It's a contamination of human garbage. I mean, I'm conscientious about it. And I almost left 2 pieces of human garbage out here. So imagine if there was like 1,000 people out here doing exactly what I was doing. But either make a law that actually accomplishes its purpose, or fuck off. Don't make a half-assed law. A couple hours later, it started raining like a mofo. So the Defiant and her memory card narrowly escaped a watery death. But the next morning, I went to a grassy park. She flew great. I had to change a couple propellers first, but my drone is fucking awesome. And I ran some software I've used successfully many times in the past to try to recover the video off the memory card of the drone, and it found absolutely nothing, which is mostly awesome and reassuring in the event something like this were to ever happen again.